deeper I dig, the weirder things get. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and recently I've gotten all tangled up trying to understand retiree recall. What it is, when it can be done, the rules for voluntary and involuntary, and where things stand right now. And part of the reason that this is important is because about a month ago, the Army issued an ALARAC message providing guidance on how to use the program. I even did a video on that one. The key takeaway is that ALARAC is written as if retiree recall is voluntary. But then one of you sent me a note pointing out that there was a small problem with that document, that involuntary retiree recall is actually in effect, and that whoever wrote that ALARAC is either unaware of that policy or they're intentionally downplaying it. Just to spoil the surprise, it has to do with this reference 1C, the DoD policy for ordering a retired personnel to active duty pursuant to Executive Order 13814. But first, let me remind you about something. The President has broad authorities to declare a state of national emergency. And when he does, he gets to pick from scores of different powers. And all he has to do is notify Congress and publish it in the Federal Register. What's more, the powers that the President picks out of U.S. Code, they continue until one of three things happens. Congress stops him, he terminates the national emergency, or he fails to do an annual continuation. But back to this retiree recall thing. So right after 9/11, George Bush declared a state of national emergency, and he tapped into a whole bunch of authorities that had to do with the Department of Defense and the Coast Guard. But notice that none of these authorities had to do with retiree recall. At the same time that he issued the proclamation, President Bush issued an executive order specifying how these powers were supposed to be used. Ever since then, every president, every year, has continued this particular state of national emergency. Here is what's interesting. In 2017, President Trump amended the original executive order by issuing his own executive order, 13814. And when he did that, he invoked Section 688 and 690 of Title 10, which are the authorities governing retiree recall. But notice that he said, subject to the direction of the Secretary of Defense. All right, now let's look back at that ALARAC. Notice that the reference B is the original executive order, and that President Trump's executive order, the one that invoked the retiree recall authorities, it isn't referenced directly. Instead, they reference this DoD policy for ordering retired personnel to active duty pursuant to Executive Order 13814. See how there's no hyperlink? I cannot find a copy of that reference. I got no idea what it says or does or what authorities it grants. And look, you can accuse me of fear-mongering or just creating clickbait, but I'll tell you, in the absence of that policy, I am suspicious that the Army could implement involuntary retiree recall like that. So, if you have a copy of that guidance, I know at least one retiree who would sleep a little bit better if you'd share it with everybody else. And if you want something else that'll help you sleep better at night, watch this video about planning for the late stages of your military retirement.